Welcome back to Together Scale.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me again.
It's been a long time, and some people have been asking me why it has taken a lot of time to come back, and I hope we have answered many people's requests today. And I have never bothered to introduce you actually to our viewers because I presume that most of them know you, but just in case, Scale is a professor of history at Kettering University. He's also an author and commentator on Ethiopian politics. He has written a lot and he has spoken a lot on Ethiopian affairs. And recently, along with his colleagues, he has been trying to bring together Ethiopians of various political persuasions to create a common platform and mount a serious challenge to the regime and bring about some sort of change. And I thought we'd focus on that, on what it is that Scale and his friends are trying to do. So maybe we could start with that, Scale, with you telling us what you have been trying to get up to lately.
Well, it's obvious to any Ethiopia observer that things are not well in Ethiopia. It's been in a civil war for 7 years right now. The devastation, the loss of lives, the devastation of property is palpable. The international community knows about it. Ethiopia is a big country, and if it's not managed well, because of existing historical and political fault lines, if the event in event of state collapse occurs, which is a real possibility today in Ethiopia than any time in the past, the impact could be catastrophic, not just for Ethiopians, but for the region, all the way to the Mediterranean basin and all the way to South Africa, because you could see the evidence of that already, that people leaving the Ethiopian scene and migrating south into many African countries, others attempting to cross to Yemen, of all places, and drown in the Gulf of Aden or the Red Sea, because the Sudan situation does not allow for people to traverse it. So there is a trickle in that area. But, there are refugees in the Sudan as well from the northern part of the country. So the evidence of what might happen if in an event of authority collapse in Ethiopia is already visible. So people in Ethiopia have been asking, at least for me in the area that I come from, the Oromo people, they've been asking for the elite, I don't know if that's the word, but for the opinion makers to stop bickering on small issues, but look at the larger picture of salvaging the country. The same situation has now become evident in Ethiopia, in many places in Ethiopia, that there must be something. People must come together and focus on what might happen. That the government is losing militarily in a number of places. The economy is in the doldrums. The country is not managed well. So all evidence of state collapse are already coalescing in Ethiopia. So an alternative needs to be put in place. And this pressure was really coming from the public. So what we did was last year we met my friends and we met in December last year in Nairobi and resolved that people should be brought together to come together and stress the danger that is in store for Ethiopia and Ethiopians and for the region and the entire area of Northeast Africa, and for the international community as well, because the Red Sea is the Gulf of Aden, the Red Sea, the Bab el Mandeb. These are really very heavy traffic of international trade passes through there, about 40% of international trade. So it's a vital area, but it's the arc of, known historically as the arc of instability. And this might be happen again if Ethiopia, which was considered in the last 3 decades the anchor state, and now had become the great destabilizer in the area, collapses. So that is the motivation, the demand from people, and the seriousness of the condition in Ethiopia is what is forcing people to come together to try to put together a different, an alternative discourse, an alternative transition, an alternative way of governing and doing things in Ethiopia as well. So that is basically what we're trying to do.
What you say that some people have been reaching out to you to ask you to try something to salvage the country, and that is such a refreshing and reassuring thing to hear, that there are people who believe in human agency, who believe that by bringing people together, by acting one way rather than the other, change could be brought about in Ethiopia. Because as you know, there are also, I would say, maybe the majority of people who have this entrenched sense of cynicism, and this defeatist and declinist view has taken root in, especially in Tigray. Maybe it's not so much in Ethiopia, and they see what is happening, and they see previous attempts at building a democratic system, from the Haile Selassie regime to the Derg regime to the EPRDF regime and then to the Abiy regime, and all of them have invariably failed. And they say that nothing is going to be different this time around. So what are you offering people now? What kind of assurances are you giving people now that this time around things will be fundamentally different?
I understand that human beings could be cynical. Cynicism could set in, and followed by hope, or preceded by hopelessness and then cynicism, that nothing could change. I don't agree with the premise, kind of slightly disagree with the premise that previous attempts at change and transformation have proven disastrous. How many attempts have we tried in the past 50 years, half century, or a little bit more than that? And what happened actually afterwards? To change the structure of governance, to change how people live, and to change how people actually talk to each other. There were three moments of change as far as I can remember. One is 1974, the other is 1991, other is 2018. So if people pay attention, it's not that these changes were a failure completely. They weren't. They have moved the country, political discourse, to a different level, but they've not fully succeeded. So it's like half full, half empty thing. See, the 1974, by 1974, at least this political dispensation where new questions, new political demands, and new movements started in Ethiopia post 1960s. Maybe 1968, when there was student movement around the world, there was also student movement in Ethiopia. And questions about economic justice, political representation, and freedom and equality were raised. That's how three fundamental issues shaped Ethiopian politics and the unfolding of events since the 1960s. So the 1974 revolution actually was able to dismantle the economic base of the entrenched feudal regime controlled by feudal aristocracy that had denied political power to Ethiopians. So by dismantling the economic base, it paved the way for more change, but after a while, the superstructure remained. And usually in revolutions, existing system has a capacity for great resilience. They co-opt the cause of the opposition movement. They seem to address it, and then they dismantle the movement itself from within. That happened in Ethiopia, but the fundamental question about economic justice centered on land was answered. Not fully, not completely, and not sustainable, but it's not total loss. 1991, the regime change of 1991 built on these successes. They did not do anything about economic justice centered on land. I'm talking about the EPRDF era. They did not dismantle the achievement of the Derg period. They kept that, but they added to it, especially focusing on that entrenched superstructure of domination. The military was dismantled. The system, the political system, was also dismantled, and a new era of recognition a new era of recognition was opened. Keep in mind, the EPRDF did not murder all the officials of the Derg regime. They brought them to justice and then put them in jail, and then afterwards they released them. We forget that. We forget that the EPRDF era started not by more bloodshedding as the Derg era started, but by bringing people who had perpetrated great grievous harm to Ethiopia and Ethiopians were actually brought to justice. And then the recognition part that I'm talking about is that they recognize that the individual and group rights of Ethiopia must be recognized. If not immediately respected, they were recognized, and the structure of governance was designed. Constitution, liberal constitution, was designed. So it was not a total loss in 1991 as well. And to that, I should add that under the EPRDF, unprecedented economic growth was achieved. So there was progress. It's not a total loss. In 2018, what remained was, the question about economic justice was not fully addressed, but recognized and attempted under the Derg era. And the superstructure of domination was dismantled and replaced by a hopeful era in which people could participate. The structure of governance, the federalization of governance and decentralization was the right step forward under the EPRDF. But because of the priority that was given to economic growth, they kept power centralized for some time. So what remained in 2018 was to move along the path of democratization. Instead of democratization in 2018, the Prosperity Party regime chose to reverse the gains of the previous 2 or 3 decades. Not for any explicable reasons, but they just rejected anything that was done under the PRDF was no good for Ethiopia. So under the Prosperity Party, re-centralization and autocratization of the system and unitarization of the systems that was tried. For what reason, I do not understand. Progress was on the right track. Democratizing the federal system was the demand of the people, of the Qero, of the Fano, of the Berberta, of the Zerma. These are all Egeto. Those were the clear demands, constitutional-based demands, but the government, the PP, tried to do the impossible. So what happened is, autocratization did not succeed. Democratization did not succeed. What we have right now is an interregnum, a government that cannot regain legitimacy, a regime that cannot provide security and economic justice for people. So we are in this limbo where the existing regime cannot bring about the change, but cannot regain control and legitimacy. What we have right now is that people do not have basic security, not in the far-flung areas like in Tigray or Gambela or Benishangul Gumuz. In the central areas near Addis Ababa, a bus full of people could be abducted, and people could be taken hostage in Sululta, not very far from Ethiopia. So this government cannot even provide basic security expected from any government. So it's not a loss. It's not a loss. It's simply the miscalculation of bringing the wrong people to power. Now, is it easy? Is it easy to go from here to democratization? No. It's going to be very difficult. But what is the choice? What would be the choice? People are cynical, I understand. But that cynicism does not bring about change. The existing regime cannot bring about change. You just have to get up, step up to the plate, and do what is the analysis, the assessment that is required, and come up with proposals that could move the country forward. But not under it just doesn't have any scintilla of legitimacy left to do anything. It's a sunk cost regime. They have invested too much on the road that they had embarked on. They cannot go back. Change is in the offing, what would be the nature of that change? Is it controlled change, or is it going to be uncontrollable change? Uncontrolled and uncontrollable change. That's the issue today. So cynicism reigns, I understand. But cynicism does not bring about change and end human suffering. It's there. So what the job today is to show people that there is a way. Big challenges. I could talk about that later on, what the challenges are, but cynicism is not an option.
Well, as you say, maybe my doom and gloom characterization of the past, maybe 40, 50 years wasn't quite right. As you say, there have been some small incremental gains, and I think that's a fair point. But it seems to me that whatever positive has been done in the country has come out of the volition of the successive regimes, not because people have possessed power and forced the government to do one thing or another, but because the regimes wanted to do something to survive. Otherwise, there has never been a moment when the people were in charge in some sense. So it seems to me that has always eluded Ethiopians, that the concept of democracy, the concept of being in charge, the concept of the people being in control of what is happening. And it seems to me that what happens usually is people come with lofty promises and all that, and they somehow contrive their way to power. And then the whole thing is hijacked. And the question that I have in mind, maybe it's too abstract or maybe it's too academic, but the question that I have is how is it going to be different this time around? If people were to trust, for instance, what you're trying to do to bring disparate political parties armed and unarmed together and bring about change, what kind of guarantees are you promising to people that this time around it will not be hijacked? And what kind of guardrails will you put to make that sort of eventuality less likely, if not improbable?
There's no guarantee in anything. I'm sure that you know in your own profession that you don't that you always keep working at it. You always try to have fallback positions and contingency planning, because there is no guarantee in anything that things could go the way you designed, because you're interacting with situations that you cannot control. So there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee except that you try, honestly. But let me try to intervene again on the question about incremental change. Under the EPRDF, it was not incremental change. It was a fundamental change. It was a structural change. The way the government, the way the people were governed were completely changed. Completely changed. It was a fundamental change. A unitary state was replaced by a federal system. A constitution that guaranteed group and individual rights was drawn. Power was decentralized from the center to the regions. The military, with all the mistakes that individual commanders make, the military was also put on an even keel of protecting the country and the constitution. So structurally, the change under the EPRDF was the right one for that moment. Why was it right? Because they responded to the demands of the people. The demands of the people for the right of self-determination as nations, but also guaranteeing democratic rights. What happened under the EPRDF, as I was trying to allude to later on, that democratization or a democratic system cannot succeed if the economic base is small. It breeds a one man, one vote, breeds a cadre of, they call them rent seekers, and the rent seekers would dismantle it. And because of that, even though the Constitution guaranteed rights, even though structurally those rights were in place, there was a controlled, state-controlled democratization, step-by-step democratization, because elections were held periodically. The regions were being strengthened gradually. But once Mr. Meles died, people could not continue at the pace that he could control the entire system. So the questions that we were asking in 2016, 2017 was that our constitutionally guaranteed rights must be respected. So the change was not incremental. It was fundamental. It was structural. The idea that under the PP regime, this has to change is a fundamental problem. It's a fundamental problem. Like I said, under the EPRDF, they were responding to real demands of the people. Demands that were articulated over a period of time. The nationalities question in Ethiopia was right, and the federal system was a response to that. The developmental state was a response to the experiences of African states and the successes of the East Asian states in Ethiopia, not to make what is called the command and control economy permanent in Ethiopia, but gradually evolve to an economy that is fair for everyone. What was missing then was democratization. That was reversed. Rights that were given to people were reversed. Rights of self-government, rights to speak, to assemble were totally, completely reversed under this new government. It's not what people asked. What would guarantee in the future? Well, everybody has lost right now, to be honest. Everybody has lost. Nobody had gained from this system. What we need at this point to have a sensible change and lasting solution, a couple of things must be done. Domination doesn't work. Domination doesn't work. Centralization doesn't work. Expansionism doesn't work. Brutality as a means of governance doesn't work. But all of these, what I just told you is what happened over the last 7 years. The opposition to the government in some areas were demanding domination. But even for this government that purports to be a representative of the Oromo, even though the Oromo are about 50% of the population and have a larger landhold, domination is not going to work. Domination is not going to, even for the Oromo. It didn't work for others, and it's not going to work for others. It's not even the right thing to do. So we have to extricate from this idea that domination is not going to work, even by people who constitute a majority of the population, demographically large, occupying a large geographic area, or the economic sizable portion of the economy. It's just not going to work. We have to come to that realization in the first place. That is an important realization. The second is expansionism doesn't work. You can't simply take land away from one area by assembling people together, call them whatever, Fano or something else, and then take away constitutionally guaranteed right. I'm talking about Western Tigray. I'm talking about Southern Tigray. I'm talking about other places in Ethiopia as well. So the idea of expansionism that at a time when the state is weak, that you could grab land from others, it's not going to work. It's going to breed more conflict. That's the second realization. The third is the PP, the Prosperity Party, introduced that if you are so brutal, one of them actually talked about draining the sea in order to catch the fish. And that's what they have been doing in Oromia. Brutality as a form of control, as a form of statecraft, is going to breed more brutality. It's not going to work. So we need to come to this realization. In fact, what happened under the PP is in the attempt to the autocratization attempt, which failed at a very high human cost and national treasure. It failed, but the militarization of politics that occurred under the PP regime, where you deploy the military to solve any political disagreement. The militarization of politics, the creation of layers of armed people by the government, some part of the government, some sponsored by the government. The militarization of politics is not going to work, so we have to embark on a path of demilitarization of politics. The other thing is the commercialization of politics in the country. It's a patrimonial state that was created by Abiy Ahmed, where the resources of the country are his. It's his patrimony. That's how he speaks about land. That's how he speaks about finance. That is how he speaks about other resources. It's his. He could dole it out to anybody, and if they are loyal, they will keep it. If they are disloyal, he will revoke it. That is what happened under the militarization of politics, the commercialization of politics. So we have to decommercialize and return institutional governance, process-based decision-making, and accountability for failure in performance has to return to governing. And the other thing is the infantile politics, the trivialization of politics, where the leader of the country speaks about real problems like people demanding salary increases. He keeps off talking flippantly, saying that no, you just don't understand. You just don't understand how wealthy you have become, when in reality people know what they live in. So this kind of the trivialization of politics must end. You asked me that how is it guaranteed? It cannot be guaranteed, but these things must be done and people must be able to see. It's a gargantuan undertaking, I understand. Well, after you have done that, after you demilitarize the politics, return to the decentralization of power. That power is efficient and could do things when it's local. And that is a response to the demands that Ethiopians have had for the last half century. And then let me say one more thing. Since I'm using this I'm going to use this word, denazification of political discourse. What was introduced in Ethiopia is basically demonize human beings. You call them junta, they call them junta actually, junta, or extremists, or jausa, or shane. You give them names, dehumanize them, and make them a fair game for that brutality. A whole group of people in Ethiopia, a whole group of people say that remove them from memory, remove them from history, remove them from our psychological makeup, remove them from our jokes and everything. That kind of rhetoric, it's a rhetoric from the Nazis. This is a Nazi rhetoric where you could annihilate a group of people, and that must be done as well. But this was done not just by the leaders of the country, but the rank and file. Even people who were supposed to be moral leaders of the country, like Orthodox priests and sheikhs, they've been using all kinds of degrading and dehumanization of people, and the denazification of people must be done. This is difficult, very difficult. At this point in time, I don't think that we can even talk about all of a return to democratization and democracy. The best we can hope for at this moment in time is that we have stability, predictability, and the predictability meaning that I could go out of my house and return. That the government, the state actually does what it is supposed to do, the basic services. It's a difficult thing because of the things that I just said, but what else? What choice do we have except trying?
Well, using long professorial words today, I think the professor in you is in charge today. But I will make up for that by sticking to monosyllabic words to make the life of our listeners easier. Just to give information to our viewers on the militarization of politics, I think Alex Dival has written an excellent book. It's more broadly on Africa. It's not necessarily on Ethiopia, but I think it sort of explains how that patrimonial system works, and I would strongly recommend our viewers to read that book. Maybe I will put a link to it. But if I could, I don't know if pushback is the right word, but on how you characterized the EPRDF system, you said that it was a fundamental change. There was a structural change. I think the reason why some listeners, at least from Tigray, would take umbrage with that characterization is that they would say, yes, it was a structural change on paper, But eventually, when the Ethiopian regime, when the Abiy Ahmed regime wanted to wage war on Tigray, it was as easy as it was during the Derg regime. The fact that there was a structural change didn't matter at all. I think that is the reason why it is a difficult sell to tell Tigrayans that the EPRDF change was fundamental or structural in any sense. I don't know if you get my point. So the federalism and the decentralized administrative system and all that shebang didn't really come to the rescue of the grants when it should have in 2018, when Abiy just bulldozed his way into Tigray. I think that is where the objection comes from. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I don't I don't um, I don't argue with anybody that the system was actually put in place. I was talking about why Mr. Mellis, after 2005, tried to centralize power. One is actually emanates from the theory of the developmental state. And secondly, he understood that if you quickly democratize, you could lose control. And he was focused, Mr. Mellis was focused on economic growth based on the developmental state. Here is what the developmental state was at that time, that if you really want to accelerate economic growth in the country, what Ethiopia had for that accelerated economic growth are two resources and labor. So they used land, for instance, to lease land to commercial activities from the center, and also improve labor, like building universities everywhere, building schools everywhere, building dispensaries, health dispensaries everywhere. That's what they focused on. But this is not about the design. This is not about the design. The design was perfect. The design was perfect as far as I'm concerned. The constitution was more than enough for Ethiopia. That was the design. Was it implemented? No, it was not implemented even under Mr. Mellis, and I don't think even Mr. Mellis and his supporters would disagree with that characterization, that the developmental state required centralization, but the federalization required decentralization, and this tension that was created between the economic and political imperative led to the collapse of that arrangement after his death. But the demand that was in place at that time, and as I think I was clear about this, that the demand that was in place during the Qeerroo Fano Barberta Zarma Ejetto revolution was that the constitution, the fundamental change, the structural change, the structure was in place. We want it to be democratized. We want it to be the design to start operating. The design was not operating under the EPRDF. Having said that about the people, it's not the design, the state design, the structural change that was put in place under the EPRDF that he used. He subverted that. He autocratized that. The Constitution is not in force. If the Constitution was in force, the election would not have been postponed in 2021. If the elections were in place, the military should not have taken the illegal and the contrived order of invading Tigray. If the Constitution had been in place, as it was under the EPRDF, as you just said, that it could have protected Tigray and everywhere else, by the way, Amhara and Oromia, and everywhere there is conflict. There is no conflict. That system is not in place right now. That system was dismantled, and that's what I call autocratization, unitarization of the state. So in practice, even though the structure that was in place did not function as it was designed under the EPRDF, it could have been perfected, it could have been improved, but instead of improving, this man took the country in a different direction, from democratization to autocratization. And what you see in Tigray, my friend, and people from Tigray, what happened in Tigray was the resistance to the change. It's not about protecting. Tigray resisted its right to self-rule. Keep in mind that the reason One of the reasons that the war broke out in Tigray is, number one, is TPLF refused to join the PP, the centralization of the party system. Second, it refused to go along with the nullification of the constitution and went ahead with holding local elections as designed by the constitution. That was the second issue. The third is that Tigray is a part of Ethiopia. And while there is an enemy on the northern side of the country, the central government was trying to remove the military from there, and Tigray resisted. So Tigray is resisting, is trying to protect its self-rule, the dismantling of the system that was designed. As imperfect as it is, the structure was then. Did it protect Tigray? No. What you see in the civil war that you see in Tigray or in Oromia and everywhere is the demand to keep the rights that the constitution guaranteed, the group rights of self-rule that the Ethiopian constitution guaranteed, but was attempted to be taken away from them. That's what the constitution is. It's a defense of those rights. Did it protect? No, it did not, because it was dismantled. All the constitutional constraints, it's the constitution that was violated when Western Tigray was taken by vigilante groups and still kept. The constitution is not in place. It cannot protect you when it's not in place. I think that's my answer to it.
Fair enough. I think the reason why I think, dwelling on how you see the constitution and the past in general, the reason why that is important is because, as the cliche goes, how you see the past is important to how you vision the future. And now here we have you, for instance, who has I think by and large positive view of the constitution, and that maybe as we'll come later, you think that the fundamental mistake of the Prosperity Party was failing to build on the positives of the EPRDF regime and correcting the mistakes, and there was serious mistakes. That is your basic criticism of the PP. But now you are trying to work with people who have a completely different view. People who believe that the constitution was a fundamental mistake and that the first thing that should be done is abolish the constitution and the structure. And they envision a completely different kind of future for Ethiopia. And I think you would be aware of that among the people that you're trying to work with today. And I think many people would justifiably wonder how is it that if you were to have things your way, for instance, how is it that you would be able to create a consistent system that Ethiopians would accept?
Well, in my view, the notion that the constitution was a problem, that it was a source of conflict, is not supported by the evidence. It's just not supported by the evidence. The notion that the elite were not represented in 1991 is not borne out by evidence. Those are claims. Those are just claims that people make, and people have the right to make claims. If the constitution is unrepresentative, or people have some problems with some provisions in the constitution, you can improve the constitution. You don't have to throw it away. You have to dismantle it. What are you going to do with the Chapter 3 of the Constitution that guarantees democratic rights, which is simply a copy of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or more specifically, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic and Social Rights? What are you going to reinvent, for God's sakes? That was basically copied and pasted on internationally agreed upon covenants for people, economic, political, social, and civil rights. By changing the constitution, fundamentally nothing is going to come. If there are problems in the constitution, there is a constitutional mechanism to improve. So look, people do not have fundamental problems in Ethiopia. If there are some elite who have fundamental problems with the constitution, it is probably representatives of a very small minority in Ethiopia. And the minority rights must be protected. The constitution could be improved in that respect. But the vast majority of Ethiopians, especially people in the south and the south in the north, They have no problem with the constitution. They did not raise this demand, for God's sakes, during the revolution of the young people that I was naming earlier. That was not, the constitutional change was not raised as an issue. Was not. Not in Oromia, not in Somali, the Berberta, not in Ejetto, Sidama, not in the Berberta, not in the Gurage area. It was not raised. It doesn't exist. So 80% of the people in Ethiopia still believe in the right of nations to self-determination and the individual to protect their rights. So let's not blow out of proportion that the opponents are the majority. So fundamentally, the majority of the people still subscribe to the notion of self-rule and shared rule at the center. And I don't think there is a better way. I have already said this. Unitarization of the state doesn't work because it was tried. It was tried before the EPRDF era. It failed. It produced the TPLF, the EPLF, the ALF, the ONLF, the SNLF, the OLF, the GNLF. It produced all of that. It failed. Unitarization failed. We've seen it before. Unitarization, the attempted unitarization of the state and centralization of power under the PP failed. It failed at a very high human cost. Now, even the constitution failed us, as you just said. As you just said, in Tigray, it failed. So we can't go back to the status quo ante even today. We have to reimagine how we're going to live together in the future. We have to reimagine it because the system as it existed, where it could have been improved, it was derailed, the process of derailed and dismantled. Now we have to start anew. But here is what I would say to people who have a litmus test. After our made our announcement that many of these politically disparate groups have come to an understanding, a consensus that the struggle for survival as individuals and as a country is more important than the rights-based demands that we've had. We have heard people reacting to say that, well, Ethiopia's unity must be respected. Ethiopia must be, respected. Ethiopia as an idea must be respected. That's what they say. That's the same thing about this unitary Ethiopia. Unitary Ethiopia that existed, unitary Ethiopia that was commanded from one center. It did not work before. It didn't work in this dispensation under the PP. That's why we are here. And it's not going to work in the future. We have to reimagine. But the insistence on this litmus test of believing in Ethiopian unity, whatever that means, whatever that really means, must change from believe in Ethiopia to believe in Ethiopians. The people must matter this time. The people in Ethiopia, their lives must matter other than this nebulous concept of Ethiopia. In the name of Ethiopia, in the name of this unity of Ethiopia, a lot of harm was done to people in Ethiopia. 1 million people died. Upwards of 100 billion in property were damaged. People in Ethiopia have lost meaning in Ethiopia. I don't tell you because we come from Tigray. My friends from Tigray, I tell them that we have lost meaning in Tigray, in Ethiopia. What does Ethiopia mean to us anymore when we were the defenders of Ethiopia throughout the centuries? Ethiopia has turned out against us and conducted genocide. Ethiopia has lost meaning to Ethiopians. The Amhara, who were the base of the Ethiopian state, have lost meaning in Ethiopia because whatever is in Ethiopia is now raining drone bombs on the Amhara, the fields and the cities and everywhere. Ethiopia as a concept had lost meaning to Ethiopians. In this process of where the process of Ethiopianization is incomplete. What I mean by that is the creation of an Ethiopian nation state is incomplete. In the Somali region, don't speak, 80% to 90% of them don't speak the Amharic language. They don't know what's going on, and they are not economically integrated with Ethiopia. Even the highlands, the history is that the Oromo and the other people on the highlands have not crossed that frontier, political frontier. They've all been marginalized, have not been integrated well. Now the Oromo, people from the Oromo extracts are in power and telling, this is what surprises me deeply, they're telling someone from Oromo, from the south, where the narrative had been, we've been victims of an expansionist Ethiopian state, is now telling Tigray, you can go wherever you want to. What would be the rump Ethiopia look like? And this is for people who are criticizing us on the basis of, oh, Ethiopia's unity must be preserved. When someone from the south, from the Oromo area, tells Tigray, you can go, what kind of Ethiopia are you going to preserve? Where one of Ethiopia's identities is the Orthodox Church, the ethos of the Orthodox Church. It originated, it grew, and expanded from Tigray. Muslims, they welcomed the family of the prophets. The Al-Najashi welcomed them, and the Muslims have this sacred site in Tigray. Civilizationally, the Ethiopian civilization, Aksum, is in Tigray. The creation of modern Ethiopian states at Adwa is in Tigray. Minus Adwa, minus Aksum, minus Orthodox Church, the origins of the Orthodox Church, minus the Al-Najashi, what kind of Ethiopia are you going to preserve? Here is the point I'm trying to make. This idea that there is Ethiopia without Ethiopians, that there is some Ethiopia without Tigrayans, there is some Ethiopia without the Somali, there is some Ethiopia without the Oromo, who are suffering under this regime that is propounding the idea of Ethiopia. Ethiopia as a concept had lost meaning to Ethiopians. We have to care about Ethiopians. We care about that. And those people that care about Ethiopia can come together. The true defenders of Ethiopia today are the victims of the Ethiopian states. They're inching to leave Ethiopia. That is what we have to do. The core conversation about Ethiopia should be about Ethiopians, not this nebulous idea of Ethiopia, in whose name a lot of harm was done to Ethiopians.
Sorry, I hear you, Scale, and it's very difficult for me to disagree with most of what you're saying. But as you know, there is a strand of thought, and this is more prevalent in the Amhara elite circles, that says that actually the constitution is the original sin. And you will know the greatest hits, right? They would say Article 39 is a recipe for disaster. In a derogative way, maybe ethnic federalism is a recipe for disaster. And that at the first opportunity, these are the things that we should correct. Now, this is a strand of thought that has a significant amount of traction. And it's not something that you could say this is a fringe view. And now you're trying to engage with people who hold these views with a deep sense of conviction. I'm not talking about those who hold these views in a cynical way. I think those could be dismissed. But there are people who truly believe these things, and you're trying to work together with these people. From an intellectual point of view, I'm curious about how do you find the middle ground with these people and with people who truly hold these views, given that you believe a completely different set of things.
And my views are my views and probably shared with others, a lot of others. And as I said, the South and the North, what I mean is Tigray, what I mean is the Agaw and the Command, and they have these demands, they have raised these demands. I didn't raise those demands for them, they did, not me. But I also respect that others actually have a different view about the Constitution and the governance of Ethiopia. I acknowledge that there is a difference of opinions on that. There are different views in Ethiopia, but we don't have to kill each other for that. That's where we agree. We don't have to kill each other for that. You said middle ground. We can find middle ground when we talk to each other as human beings. I could disagree with people who have this view of centralizing power, unitarizing the state, assimilating the cultures. Those are views. Maybe they're genuine about it. They hold on to these beliefs genuinely, trusting that that would be a better way for Ethiopia to go. But in any state, the best way to live together is, number one, to recognize the different views. Number two, empathize. Empathize meaning to try to understand the other side's views. And thirdly, you don't have to kill each other. We don't have to kill each other. We have to stop killing each other and then sit down and maybe in a genuine national dialogue and come up with a system, a structure that we all agree with. Just because I hold this view, it doesn't mean that I need to get all of it. I don't insist that. The problem in Ethiopia is that it's a winner take all the time. That's the problem, the refusal to share power. To share power, that's the refusal to share power from the center that had led to great devastation in that land. So I have my views. You could have your own views. You have your own history. But if we could sit down around a negotiating table without the poison of hating each other, if we listen to each other, empathize with the views of another person, that is how people live together in multinational, multi-creedal states. It's give and take, and it's not a contract. We always improve. We always improve through negotiations, through compromises, and that's what we are calling for. There is no end to differences of political views. That will never end. That will continue. It hasn't ended in the United States of America. It hasn't ended in Europe. It hasn't ended in Japan. It will never end. People have different interests, different understandings. Those continue to exist. What we're saying is that it's not that I give up on my views, but I understand the other side's views and I'm willing to compromise. I'm willing to sit down, talk to each other. But let's silence the guns. Let's not kill each other for this, but be willing to sit down, compromise, negotiate, and commit to the negotiated settlement of issues all the time, periodically. A national dialogue could produce a system that we all agree with. If it is always a winner take all, that I was excluded last time and I have to exclude you, that exclusivist view is not going to work. And I've already enumerated earlier the views that we must stop. Domination is not going to work. Militarization is not going to work. Brutality is not going to work. I have said that, all of those. Let's come to, as human beings, and create a system that we can all agree on. And that is not the end. We keep negotiating. We keep deliberating. We keep working at our problems. That is possible.
So you seem to be saying that to engage in a conversation, you don't have to abandon your views. You could hold your views and still engage in a good faith conversation with people who have radically different views. And indeed, that is kind of what you have been trying to do with I don't know what the name is. Is it Andinet that you call it? But maybe
we
you'll
don't have a name yet. It's only concerned Ethiopians.
Concerned Ethiopians, yes. Maybe you'll correct me if I am mischaracterizing the nature of the conversations, but it felt to me, and I have attended as a viewer, not as an active participant, and it seemed to me that you were saying, let's now focus on the greater enemy, which is the regime. Yes, we have differences. Yes, we have some sticky points that we'll come to later, maybe, but for now, let's just focus on defeating the common enemy. That seems to be the approach. And I wonder if that is the best approach. And the reason I ask you that is because There is an alternative approach, right? Which is to say, let's first debate what our differences are. Let's work out what we think, and let's first create a common ground, and let's present that to the people. Let's give the people an offer. Let's tell them this is what we are going to do. This is the kind of system that we're going to build. So you address the difficult, the sticky, the tricky points in advance, so that people could see what it is that you are trying to do. So it seems to me that there are these two approaches, and it is the first approach that you tend to gravitate towards, in my understanding. You muted, Scared, and mute yourself. Well, brilliant.
I understand that the political differences could be sorted out first and then come out to people to do what is necessary. What was said in the press release and then discussed afterwards was that as far as the differences, the political differences, the different points of view, we enumerated them. There are 5 of them. We know what the problems are, and we have put in place how they might be resolved. There are 5 categories of differences, and there are ways of resolving them. One actually says through negotiations and deliberations and compromises. Another way is transitional justice, that issues that require accountability and justice would be addressed through transitional justice. Others through referendums, like for instance, the border clashes between, it could be resolved through border clash referendums and plebiscites and democratic processes. Let me give an example as far as what kind of state should Ethiopia be. I understand there is the unity faction, the unitary view, and there is the federal view, and there is also the independent view, that a region must be independent. Those are political views. All of these could be resolved democratically. That if Ethiopia is a unitary state, it should be a democratic state. It's democratic unity. If it's a federal state, it is a democratic federal state, truly democratic, in which people participate. If it is separation, it could be democratic separation, not by war, not by force, but through democratic process. The solutions that we put forth, when we get to them, we already said that here is the direction we should go. So direction is there. The sources of conflict have been identified. The solutions have been identified, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. It's still a government in place in Ethiopia. So how could we even negotiate when we are concerned individuals? How we could even negotiate anything and agree on anything when there is a monstrous state in place? That's not where we are. But anyways, whatever you're just saying about the transitional program, we could do it. This is the first attempt. We took the first step. When we take the first step, people are asking us about the final step. We're getting together right now. When we got together and agreed on certain things, it's not just removing the government. We actually said the government is not in control, and it could even disappear at any moment. And there is a sufficient reason for believing that. But we have to prepare. One of the things that you asked me, how is it different this time? Is that we're saying before that change happens, we have to imagine a transition process. A transition process. I'm talking about really process, not even the steps. We have ideas. We can come up with a transitional process, a roadmap for that. We can do that. This is just the first, the primary step. The willingness to sit down. People who have very different views. That is a success number one. And then we'll get back and do the other things that remain. So this is the first step. Let's simply understand it, the first step. This is not the final declaration. We took the first step because people demanded it. The situation demanded it. And we'll continue to stick together and show that problems, political problems in the country could be resolved through negotiations. We will try to demonstrate that, unlike the use of the military to do anything, to solve minor disputes. That we denounce, and that we can show that direction that we must take as a country, as a society. We've already spelled it out. It's just that people don't read the fine prints. They ask their own questions, not questions that are related to our press release as far as the concerned Ethiopians' declaration is concerned.
I hear you and I agree with you, but I think clarity on this matter is very important, because one of the weapons that the regime uses to undermine efforts is to move towards democracy is to say, listen, here is Israel, who is probably a closeted separatist, and you have Ludotu, who wants us to bring back dead empires, and they're pretending to be working together, but actually they have their own irreconcilable differences, and they are toying with it. That is what they tell people. And I think the way to neutralize that is to be very clear, to be very open, to have a way of working, and to have a structure that people could see. And it could be easy for the people to see that the regime is lying. I think that is the reason why I think it's very important to be clear on these matters. And I feel like there is a gap generally. And then, people have a memory of how things transpire in Ethiopia. Like I said, I mean, you were not as damning as I was in your assessment of previous attempt. You say that there have been change. We shouldn't be all gloom and doom. So I understand that. But people have apprehension about those things, that even if we were to successfully change the government, the one that would replace it would be more or less the same, because that is how things have been historically. So I think it is incumbent upon people like you to demonstrate to people that this time around it's different, and to have things that people could see so that they could convince themselves that it is indeed different. So that is what I have in mind, Scale, if you want to reflect on those things.
To be honest, I don't really pay attention to what the government says about me or any other person, whether I am closest to the separatist or any. You can't find anything that in what I have written or said publicly that I am separatist or closer to the militarist. Listen to what I just said here with you today. That's my genuine position. Labeling, that's what the government does. But I don't give a fig about what this government says, because this is a criminal regime. This is a regime that was accused of all kinds of crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, the crime of ethnic cleansing, genocide, all kinds of crimes that are imaginable. It's a criminal regime. Whatever the criminal regime says about me is not going to stick. This is a kleptocratic regime. This is a regime where the prime minister himself owns a company that did not exist 6 years ago. Started 6 years ago, but now it's has a $15 billion contract, and it is in all economic sectors, in agriculture, in industry, in construction, in banking, in finance, mining, in transportation. It's everywhere. $15 billion. Do you understand what that means? The Ethiopian annual budget.
And Abiy always brags that one of his achievements is that he has rooted out corruption. That is what he always says.
Well, he is the most corrupt individual who has no shame, by the way. Who has no shame. I'm just telling you, this company called Ovid, which is related to him, did not exist 6 years ago. How is it in all kinds of sectors, and dominating in all kinds of sectors, and doing businesses, proudly doing businesses with the Prime Minister's office, with the Mayor of Addis Ababa, when he said Prime Minister's office, that means all ministries. It's doing all the constructions, it's doing all the import and export trade. This is connected with the Prime Minister himself. What I'm telling you that is, this is a government that is kleptocratic to the core. Shameless. This is a government led by the worst human beings who do not watch their words, who do not act like statesmen, who do not understand what it means to be holders of public office. It's a kakistocratic regime. This is a pariah regime that had offended all kinds of diplomatically pariah, that offended all kinds of people in that region. It's the biggest destabilizer. It has become a phantom state limited to Addis Ababa. Whatever they say about me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But I have said what needs to be done in Ethiopia. Here you said it's an academic jargon, but to say to take the military out of politics is not academic jargon. We have to do that. We take the corruption out of this system is not an easy task. But that's what's sustaining the system. I have also even said the trivialization of political discourse must be uplifted as well. All of these things we know what to do. And this doesn't make me an extremist. I'm dead in the middle right now. Practical, pragmatic solutions to our country's problem. So whatever they say, it doesn't matter because this is a government that is calling us Banda. This is the government that is calling us Banda. Isn't this government? Do I tell you, someone from Tigray? Can I tell someone from Tigray that the government that invited in public the Eritrean regime used the petrodollar to destroy a part of Ethiopia is telling me I am a Banda? The government that went to Moscow, the head of government that went to Moscow, Sochi, and sold the Renaissance Dam, the negotiations of it in Moscow, and then transferred it to Washington. And the government that is now impoverishing Ethiopians because it's doing the biddings of the IMF and the World Bank is telling me that I'm Banda and this is going to work? Give me a break. No, that's not going to stick. And that's why it must go, brother.
Well, that was a powerful point, and we're going to leave that at that for today, Ezekiel. But given that you're trying to bring people together, I thought I would give you the opportunity to make a plea to Ethiopians. What is it that you are saying? Given that, like we said previously, there are various actors in Ethiopia, and the conventional view is that some of the views these actors hold cannot be reconciled, which is why, for instance, in Tigray, there are people who say that the only way is independence, that we can't reconcile our dream and our vision with the dominant view in Ethiopia, for instance. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are other similar views in other parts of Ethiopia. But you seem to be of the view that actually Ethiopians have within themselves to create a system that would satisfy everybody to a degree and dissatisfy everybody to the same degree as well, which is the definition of a compromise. So what is your message then, if we were to assume that everybody was listening to us? What is your message?
My message is that we're all victims of the Prosperity Party. If the Prosperity Party, for any reason, remains in place for some time, there will be more victims. So there is an opportunity for a clean slate right now. There is nothing to preserve. There's nothing to preserve. Everything is really lost. The country is lost. The country is basically sold to the highest bidder. What has been done is been done. When I say the highest bidder, the president of the UAE was in Egypt last week, and that's where he said that Ethiopia must come to be a literal state. That meaning that Ethiopia needs a border in the Red Sea so that Ethiopia could become a Red Sea Council member. This is the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden Council, which stipulates that countries that do not border those bodies of water cannot become the members of the council, the Red Sea Council. They can't. And the president of UAE goes to Cairo and tells the president of Egypt that Ethiopia and the UAE and I don't know what the third countries should become members of the Red Sea Council. And for that, Ethiopia must become a literal state, that it has to have a border with the Red Sea. What does that mean? That Ethiopia needs to take over Assad. That's really basically what it means. Whose bidding is that? Who's doing that? Who's going to Cairo and telling that? The president of UAE. And it is the same president of UAE who is lobbying the Egyptian president on behalf of Ethiopia, that is also encouraging the Ethiopian, the Prosperity Party president to invade Eritrea. That's it. So you've lost your country is what I'm saying to Ethiopians. You've lost your country. You don't have the right to determine your own future, but you need to. If this government is going to remain in place, it's going to start all kinds of fabricated reasons to go to war against Eritrea, and on his way to Eritrea against Tigray. When is it enough? When is it enough for the central government to stop fighting against its own people, to rain in bombs on its own people? When is it going to be enough? We've lost everything. We're all victims. There is nothing to preserve. If this government remains in place, you will lose everything. Your lives, your families, everything. So it is time to get together, save your country, save your people, and save your own person. There is nothing left. The only thing that is left is to come together. That's my message.
Well, on the issue of selling the country, you briefly mentioned how Abiy went to Russia and compromised the dam, the Renaissance Dam, in a serious way. And as you will know, the regime is now ramping up efforts to celebrate, I think, the inauguration of the completion or something of the dam in September. And I think there is a lot of unknowns. There is a lot of things that haven't been told to the people. By how much was it reduced? How many turbines? What is the size of the reservoir? What was the initial design? I think there is a lot of things that are obscure in that respect. So maybe somebody should come out and explain to the people in exactly what way was the dam sold. I think many people have this vague idea that it has been sold, but the exact mechanism by which it has been done hasn't quite been made clear to the people. I think people should do that because it strikes me as something that is significant in terms of selling the country. It could actually be even treason if what people are alleging is true. But I'm not going to push you on that. Again, that is for another time. Thank you very much. I think the project, if we could call it project, that you have been trying to get going is going to remain relevant for a long time. And we're going to try to have you back and explain to us what it is that you have done. And I hope you will be generous enough with your time, as always, Scared. I have to say that viewers do appreciate your views and your effort and everything. So we're grateful for that. And thank you very much for, I was going to say for tonight, but that would be according to my time zone. I should just say for today.
Thanks for having me.